Hey, buddy, hit that subscribe. Just a sec for you, but it means the world to me. The rain was coming down hard enough to blur the lines on my windshield as I sat in my car inside the parking garage, engine off, phone vibrating nonstop in my hand. 23 missed calls. Slack notifications stacked like dominoes. Emails rolling in faster than I could read them. 2 days ago, nobody could be bothered to reply to me. Now it felt like the whole company was suddenly on fire. Funny thing is, none of this was an accident. My name is Michael Patterson. I'm 49 years old, and up until this week, I honestly thought I had my career figured out. 8 years at Pinnacle Systems. No drama, no scandals, just consistent results. Turns out I was dead wrong, not about my work, but about how much it was actually valued. 2 days earlier, my boss, Richard Wells, sat across from me in his glass-walled office and told me I wasn't ready for promotion. Didn't raise his voice. Didn't insult me. Just smiled politely and said it the way corporate people do, like they're delivering bad weather instead of bad news. Calm, casual, final. That conversation rewired something in my head. Before Pinnacle, I spent 12 years in the Navy running logistics operations. When your job is making sure supplies hit ships halfway across the world on time, you learn real fast that details aren't optional. If a process breaks, people don't just get annoyed, they get hurt. That mindset followed me into corporate life, probably more than it should have. When I joined Pinnacle, the operations department was a mess. No documentation, no handover notes, systems built on top of systems that nobody fully understood. It felt like walking into a dark house where every light switch was unlabeled and half the wiring was exposed. So I did what I've always done. I fixed it. I rebuilt workflows from scratch, documented everything, stayed late, came in on weekends, created guides nobody asked for, but everyone eventually relied on. Back then, my son Jake was 7 years old. This was about 5 years after my wife passed away, and I still remember him asking why I was always at work. I told myself it was temporary, that it would pay off. That's the lie a lot of us tell ourselves. Over the years, I became the quiet backbone of the department. When systems crashed, I handled it. When clients panicked, I smoothed things over. When executives needed numbers, explanations, or miracles, somehow it always landed on my desk. I didn't complain. I didn't brag. I just handled it. Then Richard became my boss. Richard's a big picture guy. Strategy decks, executive meetings, vision statements. Nice enough. But he never really bothered to understand how the department actually worked. He didn't need to. I made sure nothing ever blew up. What I didn't know was that while I was holding everything together, Richard was planning something else entirely. His son had just finished business school. 26. Smart, sure, but zero real operations experience. No late-night crises. No angry client calls. No systems held together with duct tape and deadlines. And yet when promotion day came around, guess who was suddenly ready? The meeting itself lasted maybe 10 minutes. I came prepared. Metrics, efficiency gains, revenue impact, the whole thing. Richard barely looked at it. Said they needed fresh energy and new perspective. Corporate bingo at its finest. His son would be stepping into the role I'd been working toward for 8 years. And me? I'd stay put. Help him get up to speed. That's when it hit me. They didn't want a leader. They wanted a safety net. Someone to quietly do the real work while the title went to someone else. I shook Richard's hand, kept my expression neutral, and walked out like it didn't bother me. But instead of heading back to my desk, I went straight to the parking garage. Sitting there in my car, listening to the rain, I made a decision that felt small in the moment, but ended up changing everything. I wasn't going to quit. I wasn't going to argue. I wasn't going to blow things up emotionally. I was going to do something way more effective. I was going to do exactly what my job description said. Nothing more. Nothing less. No unpaid overtime. No invisible problem solving. No being the glue holding together a system that refused to acknowledge it needed glue in the first place. At the time, I didn't know how fast things would start to fall apart. I just knew I was done carrying weight that wasn't mine anymore. And by the end of the week, Everyone at Pinnacle was about to find out what happens when the quiet guy stops being quiet. But what they didn't expect was how quickly they'd realize just how much they'd been leaning on me all along. Michael's first day of working the contract, and the subtle panic that starts spreading to the company within hours. Wednesday morning, I pulled into the parking lot at 8:58 a.m. Not 7 o'clock, not 7:30, not whenever the problems start. Exactly 8:58. For 8 years, I've been the first car in the lot, and usually the last one out. That morning, the building was already buzzing when I walked in, and for the first time in a long while, none of it felt like my problem yet. I sat down at my desk, logged in, and opened my official job description. I hadn't looked at it in years. Corporate language, vague as ever. Manage daily operations within assigned scope. Coordinate with other departments as needed. Maintain client relationships within operational parameters. Nowhere did it say be the emergency hotline for the entire company. So I didn't. I answered emails that were addressed directly to me. Anything else? Forwarded. If it involved shipping, it went to shipping. Finance issues went to finance. IT questions? Not my lane. I stayed polite. Professional. No attitude. No drama. By 10:30 a.m., people were already getting uncomfortable. Janet from accounting stopped by my desk, holding her laptop like it had personally offended her. Hey, Michael, quick question. Did you see the email about the Granite account schedule conflict? I did, I said without looking up. She waited. So are you fixing it? That's a logistics coordination issue. I replied calmly. I forwarded it to procurement and shipping. They'll need to align on that. She blinked, but you always handle those. I've been advised to focus more tightly on my defined role, I said, trying to be more efficient. She nodded slowly and walked away like someone had just moved the furniture in her house without warning. By lunchtime, my phone had rung 12 times. I answered exactly 3. Not because I was being difficult, but because those 3 calls were actually part of my job. The rest? I redirected them, politely. No lectures, no sighs, just clean handoffs. Around 2 p.m., Peter from procurement came by, looking stressed out of his mind. Michael, man, we've got a purchase order stuck in the system. Billing address won't validate. Can you work your magic? I leaned back slightly. What error code? System override required. Nobody knows how to push it through. That process is covered in the operations manual, I said. Section 7. Requires approval from procurement and accounting supervisors. Peter frowned. That'll take forever. It's a fraud prevention safeguard. I replied. Important one. He stared at me for a second. You've always fixed these in like 5 minutes. I had special authorization under prior management. I said evenly. With the restructuring coming up, it seemed wise to follow standard protocol. Peter walked away muttering under his breath, probably wondering when I'd turned into such a rule-following Boy Scout. By the end of the day, I left at 5:07 p.m. No dramatic exit. No announcements. I just shut down my computer and went home. Jake was sitting at the kitchen table when I walked in. Homework spread everywhere. He looked up like he'd seen a ghost. Dad, you okay? Never better, I said. Want help with algebra? He smiled in a way I hadn't seen in a while. That alone told me I'd made the right call. Thursday is when the cracks really started to show. Emails piled up unanswered. Tasks bounced between departments like hot potatoes. Minor issues turned into full-blown headaches because no one knew who actually owned them. Stuff I used to resolve in minutes was now taking hours, sometimes days. I watched it all unfold quietly. No smugness, no satisfaction, just observation. The wild part? Every solution they needed already existed. I documented it years ago. Manuals, workflows, escalation paths. They just weren't used to needing them, because I'd always been there to smooth things over. By late afternoon, I could feel the tension in the air. People were talking in low voices. Managers were suddenly circling back. Slack messages started coming in with way more urgency than usual. And still, I left at 5. Friday morning, I walked in at 9 sharp and immediately knew something was different. The front desk waved me down before I reached my chair. They need you in conference room B. Like now. Inside, the mood was heavy. Richard was pacing. His son sat stiffly at the table, flipping through documents he clearly didn't understand. 2 executives I'd never met before were on speakerphone, voices sharp and impatient. Granite Industries was on the line. Their rollout was failing. Deadlines missed. Systems misaligned. And now they wanted answers, immediately. For the first time all week, everyone in that room was looking at me like I was oxygen. I took a seat calmly. What's the specific issue? Richard tried to explain, but it was obvious he only half grasped it. I glanced at the notes. The problem was real, but also completely solvable if you knew the system. Byron, the regional director, leaned forward. Can you handle this? I checked my calendar. I have a regulatory compliance review scheduled in an hour. That deadline can't move. We can push that, Richard said quickly. Missing it triggers automatic penalties. I replied, and that affects every client. Silence. I finally said what no one expected. Austin can take the lead on Granite. The resolution is fully documented. I'll be available for guidance. Austin looked like he'd just been asked to defuse a bomb. I'm not ready for that, he said quietly. The room froze. That's when it hit them, all at once. They hadn't promoted a leader. They promoted a title. And suddenly, the one person who knew how to fix everything wasn't jumping in to save the day. Not this time. And what happened next forced the executives to confront a question they've been avoiding for years. What does this company actually look like without Michael Patterson holding it together? The uncomfortable conversations behind closed doors, and the moment Michael finally speaks the truth no one wants to hear. The funny thing about systems is that they can look perfectly fine right up until the moment the one invisible piece holding them together steps away. By Friday afternoon, Pinnacle Systems was discovering exactly how fragile things really were. The Granite Industries call had ended without a resolution. Not because the problem was impossible, it wasn't, but because nobody in the room could confidently say who actually owned it. Departments pointed at each other. Managers talked in circles. And for the first time in a long time, there was no quick fix coming from my corner of the building. I returned to my desk and went back to my assigned work like nothing unusual had happened. That's what made people nervous. Around 1:30 p.m., Richard came by. No clipboard, no executive tone. Just a guy who'd lost control of his day. Michael, he said quietly, can we talk? I followed him into an empty conference room. He shut the door and leaned back against the table. This week, things have been rough, he said. I nodded. Transitions usually are. He sighed. You've always been the one who keeps things moving. We need that right now. I kept my voice even. I've been keeping things moving outside my role for years. Richard frowned. That's not fair, isn't it? I replied. When was the last time you reviewed the operations manual I built? He didn't answer. When was the last time anyone else was trained to handle escalation paths? I continued. Or vendor overrides, or cross-system dependencies. Still nothing. I didn't stop doing my job this week. I said calmly, I stopped doing everyone else's. He rubbed his face. Granite is threatening to escalate to corporate. They should, I said. That's the proper channel. He stared at me like he was seeing me for the first time. You're really serious about this? I'm serious about clarity, I replied, and accountability. Word spread fast. By mid-afternoon, I noticed managers hovering near my desk, pretending to check emails while clearly listening for signs I might step in. Someone from IT sent me a message that just said, "You good? Things are wild today." I replied with one sentence. Following documented processes. At 4:45 p.m., Byron, the regional director, showed up in person. That never happens unless something's broken. He stopped by my desk, gave a quick nod, and said, "Michael, got a minute?" We went to his office. He closed the door. "Talk to me," he said. "What's going on?" I explained. No emotion, no accusations, just facts. How my role had slowly expanded without title, authority, or compensation. How knowledge had centralized in one person, me, because it was convenient. How the system wasn't sustainable. Byron listened carefully. So you're saying the problem isn't Granite, he said slowly. It's how we've been operating. Exactly, I replied. Granite is just the first visible crack. He leaned back. Why now? I thought for a moment. Because I was just told I wasn't ready to lead, while being asked to continue leading from the shadows. Byron exhaled. That's not a great look. No, I agreed. It isn't. At 5 p.m., I packed up and left. Monday was when everything collided. I walked in to find an emergency meeting already scheduled. Conference room A. All senior staff. Corporate dial-in. Granite Industries on the agenda again. Except now, they weren't asking politely. The mood was tense. Austin sat stiffly at the table. Suit pressed, eyes tired. He'd spent the weekend trying to learn in days what normally takes years. And to his credit, he looked like he was actually trying. Byron opened the meeting. We need to resolve this today. I spoke up. The solution is documented. It requires coordinated changes across 3 systems, in a specific order. Everyone turned to me. Can you take the lead? One of the corporate executives asked. I paused just long enough. I can, I said, but we need to be clear about something first. The room went silent. For years, I've been acting as the unofficial director of operations without the title, authority, or support. That's not sustainable. And it's not fair to the people who are supposed to be learning these systems. Richard shifted uncomfortably. I'm happy to help, I continued, but not under the old assumptions. Byron nodded slowly. What are you asking for? Before I could answer, Austin spoke up. I shouldn't have been promoted into this blind. That's on me, too. Everyone looked at him. I need training, he said. Real training, not just a title. That admission changed the room. For the first time, the conversation stopped being about saving face and started being about fixing the problem. Byron turned to me. If you were designing this department from scratch, what would you change? I took a breath. And that's when I realized something important. This wasn't revenge. This wasn't about being right. This was leverage. And leverage only works if you use it wisely. Because the next words out of my mouth were about to decide whether I stayed or walked away for good. Closed doors negotiation. The offer no one expected. And the moment Michael forces a company to choose between convenience and competence. The room stayed quiet after Byron asked his question. If you were designing this department from scratch, what would you change? That wasn't a casual question. That was a door opening. The kind you don't get twice. I didn't rush my answer. People always expect urgency in a crisis. What they don't expect is composure. I'd separate roles from habits. I said finally, right now, this department runs on assumptions. Assumptions about who will step in, who will stay late, who will fix it quietly. That's not leadership, that's dependency. The corporate executive on the call cleared his throat. And how would you remove that dependency? By making responsibility visible. I replied, clear ownership, cross-training, no single point of failure, and promotions based on readiness, not proximity. That last part landed hard. Richard shifted in his seat. Austin stared at the table. Byron didn't interrupt. For years, I continued, I've been filling gaps because it felt like the right thing to do. But every time I did that, I prevented the company from seeing where the real problems were. So you stopped, the executive said. I stepped back. I corrected. There's a difference. The meeting ended without fireworks. No decisions. No raised voices. Just a promise that leadership would circle back. I went back to my desk and finished my assigned work. At 5 o'clock, I shut down my computer and left. That night, I made it to Jake's baseball game again. He didn't pitch that evening. Played shortstop instead, but he caught a line drive that had the whole crowd clapping. When he looked over and saw me standing there, glove under his arm, he smiled like that was a real win. On the drive home, he asked, "Work's still weird." "Yeah," I said, "but the good kind of weird." Tuesday morning, I got an email from Byron asking me to come by his office. No subject line. No urgency flag, just a time. When I walked in, the tone was different. No pacing, no tension. "Sit down," he said. "We need to talk honestly." He didn't sugarcoat it. Corporate had reviewed the situation, the granite escalation, the internal bottlenecks, the uncomfortable realization that one person had been carrying far more responsibility than anyone wanted to admit. "We put ourselves in a bad position," he said, "and we put you in a worse one." I nodded. I didn't create the system. I just adapted to it. "We like to fix that," he said, "but we need to know something first." "What's that? Are you already halfway out the door?" That was a fair question. "I was contacted by a competitor last month." I said calmly, "Director-level role, significant pay bump, remote flexibility." Byron leaned back slowly. "And you didn't take it?" "Not yet," I said. "I wanted to see if Pinnacle was willing to see what it actually has." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "We should have done this years ago." The offer came next, not dramatically, not emotionally, just business. Director of Operations, expanded authority, real staffing power, a compensation adjustment that finally matched the scope of the work. Not flashy, not insulting either. "What about Austin?" I asked. "He'll step into an associate role," Byron said. "Learn properly, earn advancement." "And Richard?" Byron paused. "Richard's strengths are strategic. Operations will no longer report through him." That was accountability, not punishment. "I need time," I said. "Take it," Byron replied. "But Granite still needs to be stabilized." "I'll handle it," I said, with Austin assisting. That afternoon, Austin and I worked side by side. No ego, no shortcuts. I explained the system dependencies, not just the steps. He listened, took notes, asked thoughtful questions. "This is a lot deeper than I realized," he admitted. "It always is," I said. "That's why titles come last." By 4:30, Granite was stable. No heroics, just solid execution. At 5 p.m., I left. That weekend, I thought hard about the offer. Staying meant fixing a broken system, one that had overlooked me once already. Leaving meant a clean slate. No history, no baggage. Sunday night, Jake asked, "Are you going to be home more now?" I looked at him and realized the decision wasn't really about work anymore. It was about time. And by Monday morning, I knew exactly what I was going to say. Because sometimes the real power move isn't walking away. It's staying on your terms. The fallout inside the company and the quiet moment when Michael finally stops being visible. Monday morning, I arrived at 8:30 a.m., not early enough to signal desperation. Not late enough to send a message, just deliberate. I walked straight to Byron's office. He was already there, coffee untouched, staring at his screen like he'd been expecting me. "I'm accepting the offer," I said before he could speak. "But there are conditions." He nodded. I figured there would be. "First," I said, "I want full authority to build depth in this department. No more single points of failure. Training, documentation, and cross-coverage are non-negotiable." "Agreed," he said immediately. "Second," I continued, "advancement has to be earned. No fast-tracking without capability. That includes people with connections." Another pause, then a slow nod. "Understood." "That's it," I said. Byron smiled slightly. "You realize you just rewired half the company." "Good," I replied. "It needed it." The announcement went out before lunch. Director of Operations, reporting directly to Byron. New structure, new accountability model. The reaction was quiet, which told me everything. No applause, no congratulations parade, just people recalibrating. Power shifts rarely announce themselves. They just settle. Richard didn't come by my desk. He didn't need to. By Wednesday, the changes were already visible. Meetings had agendas. Issues had owners. Decisions didn't funnel automatically toward me anymore. And when they did, they came with context, not panic. Austin showed up early every day. Not to impress anyone. To learn. He asked real questions. The kind that don't sound smart unless you're actually trying to understand. I respected that. One afternoon, he said, "I get it now. This job isn't about reacting fast. It's about seeing what breaks before it does." I nodded. Exactly. Jake noticed the difference before anyone else. I was home for dinner every night, not exhausted, not half present, just there. One evening, he said, "You don't look mad anymore." I was never mad. I told him. I was tired. The company stabilized fast, not because I was doing more, but because I was finally doing less of the wrong things. Delegation isn't absence. It's design. 6 weeks later, the department was running without me needing to jump in constantly. That was the real win. Then something unexpected happened. A recruiter called. Same competitor. Better offer this time. I didn't rush the call. I listened, thanked them, said I'd think about it. That night, I sat at the kitchen table after Jake went to bed and realized something that surprised me. I wasn't tempted. Not because the money wasn't good. But because I wasn't invisible anymore. The work had shape. The respect was real. And the system finally worked without burning one person out to keep it alive. The next morning, I declined the offer. Not out of loyalty, out of alignment. Because when you stop being the safety net, people either replace you or they finally build the structure they should have had all along. And Pinnacle had chosen structure. But just when I thought the story was over, Richard made one last move that forced me to decide what kind of leader I really wanted to be. The final test of leadership, the lesson no one expects, and why sometimes a quiet win is the most powerful one of all. About a month after the restructuring, Richard finally asked to meet. Not an ambush, not an emergency, just a calendar invite. When I walked into his office, it looked different. Fewer folders, cleaner desk, no pacing. Whatever fight he'd been carrying before, he'd set it down. "I owe you an apology," he said. I didn't interrupt. "I let convenience replace leadership," he continued. "I leaned on you because it was easy, and I hid behind strategy while you carried execution. That wasn't something I'd expected to hear." "I thought I was protecting my son," he admitted. "What I was really doing was setting him up to fail." I nodded. "You're not the first manager to confuse access with readiness." Richard exhaled. "You could have burned this place down when you had the chance." "I didn't want revenge," I said. "I wanted a system that worked." That was the moment I knew the reset was real. Over the next few months, the changes stuck. Knowledge was shared instead of hoarded. Problems were surfaced early instead of quietly absorbed. When something broke, it was traced, not buried. Austin found his footing. Not overnight, not magically, but steadily. He made mistakes, owned them, and learned fast. And when he finally earned his first real win on a client issue, the pride on his face wasn't about status. It was about competence. One afternoon, he stopped by my office. "Thanks for not letting me skip the hard part." "Hard parts of the job," I said. "Titles just come later." Jake finished his baseball season that spring. I didn't miss a single game. One night, as we sat at the kitchen table working through homework, he looked up and said, "You're important at work now, right?" I smiled. "I always was." "So why didn't they see it?" "Sometimes," I said, "people don't realize what's holding things together until it steps back." He nodded like that made perfect sense. And honestly, it did. Because here's the truth no one tells you in corporate life. If you make yourself indispensable by overworking, you don't get promoted. You get trapped. The real leverage isn't doing more. It's doing exactly what you were hired to do and letting the system reveal itself. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't quit in anger. I didn't demand respect. I let the absence of my extra effort speak for itself. And when the company finally saw what that effort was worth, they adjusted, not because I begged, but because reality forced their hand. So if you're the quiet one at work, the fixer, the stabilizer, the person everyone relies on but no one publicly acknowledges, remember this. Your value doesn't disappear just because others overlook it. Sometimes the most powerful move you can make is to stop making their blindness your problem and go home on time.